Okay, welcome back. Esoteric Dutyism, Duties of the Heart, Chapter 9. I was doing a lot of yard work today. I'm a little sweaty, sorry about that. But we got the Shavuos holiday coming up, and I hope to finish this book tomorrow. Wonderful. Been gaining so much insight from doing this. Hope other people have had some benefit from this. Neither this chapter or the next one's super long. Here we'll be talking about the Gate of Abstinence. So let's get started. Since our previous discussion dealt with the accounting of a man with himself, and abstinence from this world's interest was one of the ways of such an accounting, I deemed it proper to follow with a clarification of the various types of abstinence and which forms of abstinence are a duty for men of Torah, religious people to adopt. For this furthers the improvements of one's religious and secular pursuits and brings peace of mind and body in both worlds, here and hereafter. It is proper for us to clarify 7 matters on the subject of abstinence. 1. What is general abstinence and why do human beings need it? 2. The special abstinence for the followers of Torah and the need for abstinence by them. 3. The classes of abstainers and are as determined by their type of abstinence. 4. The conditions of special abstinence. 5. The kinds of abstinence which is in accord with our Torah. 6. What the Torah and the books of the prophets tell us on abstinence. 7. The difference between the early ones and between us regarding abstinence. Chapter 1. What is general abstinence and why do human beings need it? Regarding what is general abstinence and why do human beings need it, I will answer this question as follows. Abstinence is a term which connotes many matters. The term is commonly used, but the true matter is a hidden secret. When the cloak is removed and the seal is broken, its hidden matter will appear and its purpose will be revealed. The plain meaning of abstinence is to bride the inner lust and to refrain from something that one has the ability and opportunity for due to reason which obligates this. It is said the abstainer is the one who has the power but does not use it. The reasons which obligate bridling the inner lust divide into 2 categories. 1, that which applies to human beings collectively and many of the other living creatures, such as abstaining from excessive eating and mating. 2, that which applies specifically to men of Torah, Jews. General abstinence is that which is practiced for the welfare of our bodies and to keep our secular matters in good order. Examples are the practice of kings in instituting laws of the land, the regimen prescribed by doctors for the healthy or the sick, the practice of every intelligent being to bridle his lust for food, drink, marital relations, clothing, speech, and his other activities and pleasures. The abstinence which applies specifically to men of Torah is that kind which the Torah and reason teaches on behalf of the soul in the afterlife, as I will explain later on with God's help. The need for abstinence in general sense is due to what I have already introduced in the 3rd gate of this book, namely that the Creator's purpose in creating mankind was in order to bring difficulties to the soul and test it in this world so that it purifies itself and attains the form of the holy angels, as written, if you walk in my ways and if you keep my charge, you too shall judge my house and you too shall guard my courtyards, and I will give you a place to walk among these that stand. Divine wisdom necessitates the testing of the soul in physical earthen bodies which can grow and gain mass through eating of food suitable for it. God then implanted in the souls of human beings a desire for the foods appointed to its body in this world in order to sustain and maintain them during the time of their union. God implanted human beings another power. Through this a man longs for marital relations so that a human being should procreate another individual to take his place. The Creator granted him reward for these functions, namely the pleasure in this. God instituted on man an inclination which drives him to eat, drink, engage in marital relations, and partake of other pleasures and relaxations, which further the welfare of his body, as written, also he has set the world in their heart, that every man should eat, drink, and enjoy the good of his labor. It is the gift of God. But when this inclination predominates over the understanding and the soul is drawn to it, the man turns to the excesses which bring to his detriment in the destruction of the body. It is necessary because of this a measure of abstinence from pleasures and relaxations in order to balance his tendencies, and that his affairs be proper order in this world, so that he will be considered praiseworthy in them, as written, a good man shows favor and lends, he will guide his affairs with judgment. Since it is necessary for human beings to practice abstinence, which will further their welfare in this world by taking from it only what is necessary, it follows that there should be in this world complete ascetics which separate and cut themselves off completely from secular occupations, so that all of mankind can learn from them on abstinence, each person according to his need and according to what is fitting for his customs and tendencies. It would not, however, further the welfare of mankind if everyone would practice asceticism like them, because this would lead to the abandonment of civilization and to the end of the human race. As the verse already said, he did not create it to be deserted, but formed in it to be inhabited. Abstinence is one of the cornerstones of the world, and the need of human beings for it, just like their need for other sciences and trades, in which some nations excel over others for the benefit of all of mankind. Each class takes from the world according to its need and what is suitable for it. It would not further the welfare of the world if everyone devoted himself to only one field and no others, because the general welfare of the world is furthered by the cultivation of all fields, as the wise man said. Also, he has set the world in their heart, and everything has a time and place. We have explained with this introduction the concept of general abstinence and the need of human beings for it, so that they may order their affairs in this world through it. Chapter 2, the special abstinence for men of Torah. What is the special abstinence, and what need do men of Torah have for it? The sages are divided as to its definition. Among them, one said abstinence is the renunciation of all that distracts one from God. Another said to be disgusted by vanities of this world and curtailing desires. Another said abstinence is tranquility of the soul and curbing its tendency for idle imagination. Another said abstinence means to trust in God. Another said to limit oneself to wear only basic clothing or whatever material, and likewise to eat only enough to survive and push off one's hunger and to abhor everything else. Another said abandoning the love of company of human beings and to instead love solitude. Another said abstinence means gratitude for the good and bearing difficulty patiently. Another said abstinence means to deny oneself all the leisures or pleasures of the body except for what one's nature requires and that one cannot live without, and to remove everything else from the mind. The last definition is closest to the abstinence prescribed in our Torah and better than all the other definitions we mentioned. The need for the Torah observant to practice abstinence is as follows. The Torah's aim is to make the understanding rule over and prevail over the lust of the lower soul. It is well known that overpowering of lust over the understanding is the beginning of all sin and the cause of all that is reprehensible. The people did not incline towards the lust of this world until they had turned away from the Torah. Then the evil inclination enticed them to abandon cultivating the world of their salvation, and thus they turned away from the path of their forefathers, who limited themselves to what was necessary and the amount that was necessary, and who were contented with what was sufficient for their livelihood. Inclination enticed them by making hoarding, increasing worldly possessions seem beautiful, by making indulgence in worldly pleasure seem desirable, and by inducing pride in owning worldly possessions until they sank in the depths of its seas. Evil inclination then forced them to suffer the pain of being tossed by its waves. The world rules over them and stops up their ears and shuts their eyes. There is not one of them who does not occupy himself with indulging in its pleasures whenever he can reach it and an opportunity presents itself. This is the Torah and his religion, until he is led completely astray from God. Is written, your own wickedness shall correct you, and your backsliding shall reprove you. Know that it is evil and bitter that you have forsaken the Lord your God. Included in this class of people is also one who has been denied that pleasure, but his mind is set on it, his soul longs for it and lives for it, and his heart heartily pursues it night and day. As written, devises mischief upon his bed. He sets himself in the way that is not good. Both these classes are drowning in the sea of desires and lust, each in his matter, and yet they're cut off inwarily from ever reaching any good out of it. They are losing in their business trade, their souls diminished, and their choice is bad. They are foolish in their exchange. It's written, they exchange their glory for the likeness of an ox eating grass. The incessant call of habit overpowers them. They exert themselves and take pride in their business trade in which they are losing, and which never ceases to distract their minds from the resulting vanities and to entrench in their hearts its never-ending desires. The more they become embroiled in this world, the more they distance themselves, and the further they distance from the light of truth from which they parted due to their association with the evil inclination, and the more the darkness engulfed them, and the world grew on them. The striving for its improvement became embellished in their eyes, and they ingrained themselves in the destruction of their understanding. The more this world was improved, the greater was the destruction of their understanding, until they considered its evil ways to be good and its straying to be right, and they turned this into a statue and a moral outlook. Parents then bequeathed this outlook onto their children. Their teachers aroused it, and the masses were commanded to follow it. Their nobles vied with each other on it until the evil inclination became firmly entrenched in them, and they filled their homes with vanities. What had been strange to them became familiar to them, while the right way became strange to them. Whoever was contented and refrained from pursuing the superfluous, they considered him to be neglecting his duties. Each one of them did as he saw his fellows do. One who only took in this world what was sufficient for himself was called lazy. One who delayed to accumulate of it was considered a slacker. One who contended with only what he needed was considered a weakling, while he who surpassed this amount was regarded as an industrious man. And they praise themselves and pride themselves in it, and on the account they befriend, become angry, and congratulate each other. In order to benefit from it, they point their bellies as their God, fine clothing as their Torah, and houses in strong conditions as their ethics. They went astray in the depths of folly, moving in the courts of idleness, laden with burdens of lust, and claiming the reward of the worshippers, while committing the acts of the transgressors and the levels of the righteous with the conduct of the wicked. As the sages said, they commit the sins of Zimri and seek the reward of Pinchas. Since the evil inclination has brought most of the men of Torah as far as we have described, it is necessary to stand up to it with the special abstinence which we have described at the beginning of this gate. With the help of abstinence, we should hold firmly against the evil inclination until reaching the proper Torah way for religious and secular pursuits. Therefore, it is necessary for there to be among the men of Torah special individuals, bearers of the special abstinence, who take on its conditions and thereby benefit the other men of Torah who turn and tend towards the animalistic lusts, the doctors of the souls to the religion. They bring healing to those who stray from the good traits and tended towards the disgraceful traits. Then the evil inclination has prevailed over their understanding, and when their occupation with increasing the superfluous of the world distracts them from the things essential in their religion. If a man with sickness of faith or who is sick with doubts comes to them, they will hasten to heal him with their genuine wisdom. If one is fleeing from the service of God, they will return him to it and reassure him in it. If one is burdened by his sins, they will reassure him of the forgiveness of God when he repents for his sins. If one who has forgotten God, they will remind him. If a righteous person, they will praise him. If one loves God, they will love him. If one who magnifies God's omnipotence, they will magnify him. If he sins, they will exhort him to repent immediately. If he is physically sick, they will visit him. If they have more than they need of the world, they will bestow him of it. If some troubles befall him, they will come to his assistance. In this world, they are similar to the sun, which shines its light on the world above it and below it, since it illuminates what is above it and what is below it of the celestial spheres and planets. So too they shine on this world, as written. God said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous men within the city, then I will spare all of the place for their sake. And therefore he said that he would destroy them had not Moses, his chosen, stood before him in breach to turn away his wrath. And in the next world, as written, the fruit of the righteous is the tree of life. And therefore Devorah said, they that love him shall be as the sun when it grows forth in its might. You will find that the conduct of abstinence was practiced by the prophets in the early pious ones in previous generations, is clearly explained in their books, and as I will expound further in its proper place, with God's help, blessed be he. Chapter 3, the classes of abstainers. As to how many classes the abstainers are divided, I will answer this question as follows. As we introduced, abstinence from this world is due to one of two reasons. One is religious and the other is secular. Those who abstain due to religious reasons, they are the true genuine abstainers, and are divided into three classes. 1, men who went after the highest extreme of asceticism to be like spiritual beings. They renounce everything that distracts them from God. They left civilization to dwell in the deserts, the wastelands, and the high mountains, places where there is no companionship and no acquaintance. They eat whatever can be found, vegetation growing in the soil and leaves of the tree. They dress in worn garments and raw wool. They take shelter in the rocks. Their fear of the Creator drives away fear of the created beings. Their delight and love of God distracts them so much that they do not think of the love of human beings. They are content with whatever sustenance God reserves for them, and they do not expect anything from human beings. This class is the furthest extreme of all the classes from the middle way described by the Torah, for they renounce worldly interests completely, and the Torah does not bind us to give up social life entirely. As we've introduced earlier in the verse, he did not create it to be a waste, but formed it to be inhabited. The second class, men who went in the middle way of abstinence, they are completely repulsed with the superfluous things of the world and undertake to bridle their lust in them. The superfluous things are of two types. One, superfluous things which are outside of a man and separate from him, such as material things as food, drink, clothing, and dwelling. Two, superfluous things which cleave to a man whose causes are not outside of him, such as superfluous speech, laughter, relaxation, leisure, watching or listening useless things, and useless musings. This second class has renounced all things that are superfluous, but did not deem it fit to withdraw from society. They stayed to provide their bodies with its minimum need, as is their duty. They exchanged the deserts and mountains with confinement in their homes and solitude in their dwellings. They attained both matters and reached both portions. They are closer to the middle way of Torah than the previous class. The third class consists of those who walk on the lowest level of abstinence. They separated themselves from the world in their hearts and minds, but they associate outwardly with other people in the rectification of the world, such as plowing and sowing. They also actively toil with their bodies in the service of God. They realize that a man is being tested in this world, and that he is like a prisoner and the stranger in it, taken from the world of spirits and brought here. They are repulsed by the pleasures of this world and by its wealth, and they long for the next world. They wait for death, and yet they guard themselves from death. They prepare provisions for the time of their journey, and they consider with what they will arrive to their final abode before their departure. They take from this world the minimum of their food needs, yet do they not neglect anything of taking and carrying provisions that will be good for their final end according to their ability. This class is closest to the correct balance and the right way because it is in accord with the Torah more than the other classes we mentioned. Abstinence in secular affairs. Those who practice abstinence in order to secure worldly benefits, their abstinence is of the limbs, but not in their minds and hearts. They fall into three classes. One, those who abstain from some of the lusts of pleasures in order to gain reputation for abstinence and in order to receive praise for their faith or piety, so that through this method they will obtain their full lust. They are hypocritical in faith and in abstinence, doing so in order that men should trust them, deposit their money by them, and reveal their secrets to them, so that they will be able to harm them. They are the worst class of all human beings. They are the furthest removed from the truth and are more disgraceful than anything else. Of such people, Scripture says, their tongue is a deadly arrow. It speaks deceit. With his mouth one speaks peace to his neighbor, but inwardly he sets an ambush for him. Two, the second class, those who obtained a small amount of wealth, when they see how swiftly money is lost and circumstances change, and combined with their little trust in God, they pain themselves by eating little and abstaining from their lusts to save money. Then they claim that abstinence has pushed them to live like this. But after true inspection, what really brought them to this is their great love for this world, their zeal to increase of its wealth, their worry for poverty, and their little satisfaction with what they obtain from this world. Of such people, the wise man said, a man who God has given riches and property and honor, and his soul lacks nothing of all he desires, yet God gives him not power to eat of it, but a stranger eats of it. This is vanity, and it is an evil affliction. The third class, those who are not capable of making enough money and have only acquired enough money to live in the poorest of circumstances. They deemed proper to maintain their self-respect and subsist with whatever food they can obtain rather than having to stand and ask and embarrass themselves to beg from other people. They restrained their desires by bearing constant hunger and by covering themselves with basic clothing. They do this in order to avoid receiving charity and not be ashamed of asking help from others, thereby becoming disgraced, but they claim to be doing all of this out of asceticism. If you wish to test the true motive of one who claims to practice abstinence, whether he's doing it for religious or secular improvement, test them with the condition of perfect abstinence, which I will mention, and you will, with God's help, discern whether they are genuine ascetic or only pretending to be so. Chapter 4. The marks of special abstinence. The marks of special abstinence are, as one of the pious declared, the genuine ascetic. His joy is on his face and his sorrow is in his heart. His heart is exceedingly broad. His soul is exceedingly lowly. He does not bear a grudge. He does not covet. He does not speak negatively of anybody. He does not discuss anyone. He abhors being honored. He hates dominion over others. He is calm and collected. He remembers well. He admits the truth. Has much shame. Avoids damaging. If he laughs, it will be little. If he becomes angry, he will not be wrathful. His laughter is a mere parting of the lips. His asking is in learning. His wisdom is extensive and his humility is great. His resolving is strong. He's neither hasty nor foolish in his actions. His arguing is polite. His reply is courteous. He acts righteously when angry. He is compassionate when entreated. His friendship is sincere. His resolution is strong. His covenant is faithful. His desires in the judgment of the Creator. He rules over his evil inclination. He does not speak badly about one who harmed him. He does not occupy himself with what is not useful. He does not become joyful in the downfall of his enemy. He does not remind to anyone a wrong which that person has done him. He troubles others lightly but helps them much. His gratitude is great at a time of bad. His bearing is patient at a time of financial loss. If one asked him, he gives. If he was robbed, he forgives. If others refuse him for something, he will nevertheless volunteer. If they keep him at a distance, he will nevertheless bring them close and be friendly to them. He is softer than butter, sweeter than honey. He exhorts others to adhere to the truth. He speaks righteously. He relinquishes his desires and looks forward to its final day. What he says he does. He is wise. He is energetic. His soul is noble. His covenant is agreeable. He is powerful in the land. He is free of all that is blameworthy. He is helper of the poor and savior of the oppressed. He does not expose what is hidden, nor reveal a secret. His troubles are many, but his complaints are few. If he sees good, he will mention it. If he sees bad, he will cover it. He is pleasing in his manners and pure in his heart. His company is joy. His absence a cause for sorrow. Wisdom purges him. Humility has embellished him. He is a mentor to the wise. He is a teacher to the ignorant. Every act of others he considers purer than this. Every person he considers more pure than himself. He is aware of his own lacking. He remembers his iniquity. He loves God and chases to do his will. He does not take revenge for any wrong done to them. He does not keep his anger long. His company is with those that remind him of his duty to God. He sits with the humble. He loves men of righteousness and is faithful to men of truth. He helps the poor, is a father to the orphan and protector of the widows, and shows respect to the needy. To these marks of a true ascetic should be added that he undertakes all the duties of the heart we mentioned early in this book, in which I do not need to repeat them, so that this treatise does not become too lengthy. Take note for yourselves. Chapter 5. What kind of abstinence is in accordance with the Torah? Regarding what kind of abstinence is in accordance with the Torah, I will answer this question as follows. The abstinence recommended by the Torah is on three fronts. 1. When engaged with business relations and with other people, and when engaged in social actions with them. 2. In matters which relate to ourselves alone and do not affect other people with respect to the function of our physical senses and movements of our limbs. 3. In matters which relate to ourselves alone and do not affect others with respect to our inner being, our traits, our thoughts, whether good or bad, that are hidden from our hearts. All these I will explain in concise matter as well as I can with God's help. Social abstinence. The proper abstinence to adopt in association with other people is as follows: to receive them with a cheerful countenance and to exhibit joy when meeting them, at the same time cultivate humility, gentle speech, and a lowliness of spirit towards all of them, showing them mercy, graciousness, and compassion, relieving them of their troubles, speaking good of them, doing kindness to them without expecting any benefit from them, and abandoning all thought of receiving anything of what belongs to them, to help them with what can further their religious or secular welfare, and to teach them the way which God approves, to patiently bear their difficult words, or to pour out one's words before God and not before them, to keep away from gatherings that assemble for eating, drinking, and merrymaking, and to avoid anything in association with them that would lead to rebellion against God, or going out of the bounds of modesty, tradition, morality, and the like. Abstinence in the senses and limbs. What is proper for us in the second type of abstinence, namely that which relate to ourselves alone and involves only our physical senses and limbs. This divides into two categories. The first refers to what is forbidden to us. These are the prohibitions, the negative commandments. The second refers to what is permitted to us. These are the things permitted to us and all the permitted enjoyments. But both categories subdivide into three divisions. Regarding the negative commandments, everything that is forbidden to us necessarily falls into one of three classes. One, that which is in a person's nature to desire these things, such as forbidden relations, theft, taking interest, eating or drinking of forbidden foods. Two, that which is neutral to a person's interest, namely that he does not desire it nor abhor it, such as wearing shatnez, the forbidden mixtures of linen and wool, sowing kalayim, the forbidden mixture of seeds, eating milk and meat together, eating forbidden fat, and many of them more like this. Three, that which is in a person's nature to abhor and be disgusted by these things, such as eating from an animal's carcass, eating blood of various types of creatures which man would not want to eat, even if these were permitted, such as the 8 species of rodents and reptiles, or others like these. It is proper for you, my brother, to train yourself in abstinence, to abstain from all that God has forbidden you, until you reach a level that you are equally disgusted by what your nature desires as you are, but by what your nature abhors, so that forbidden relations or obtaining things in a forbidden matter, such as theft, oppression, or interest, or the like, seeking to honor yourself through lowering someone else, or holding him in contempt, which by nature are things people swiftly desire, should be as repellent to you as eating mice, blood, or reptiles, which your nature abhors and which your soul hates. When you reach this level of abstinence from prohibited things without needing to force your nature and without resistance from yourself, you will belong to the class of those saved from sin and stumbling, which the verse says of no mischief shall befall the righteous. Similarly, the permitted things fall into one of three categories: taking food whereby one does not do so with the intent for deriving pleasures, but because one cannot live without it and one has no other remedy besides this. Two, taking permitted food in the way of overlooking beyond what is necessary for mere enjoyment, but not to excess or unbridled overindulgence in order to complement the minimum necessary. For example, eating good bread with decently prepared dishes and drinking good wine in moderation, and likewise in one's clothing, home, and other requirements. Three, taking much indulgence of the permitted pleasures. This distances a person and leads him to also indulge in prohibited pleasures, besides the distraction it brings from fulfilling his duties to God, as written, lest he drink and forget that which he decreed. Thus it is proper for you, my brother, to strive with all your ability to practice abstinence from the permitted pleasures until they become equal in your eyes to the prohibited pleasures, for fear lest you abandon your Torah and neglect your duties. You already know what the Torah commanded a Jewish king in saying, neither shall he have many wives to himself, lest his heart turn away, and it said, he shall not have many horses. Furthermore, it says, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Even for him, the woman caused him to sin, despite his exceedingly powerful intellect, vast understanding, and greatness. Hence, how much more so for you, according to your understanding, take heed and guard your soul, and abstain from all unnecessary enjoyments, even those permitted, that will distance you from fulfilling the commandments of God. At least do so in your heart and mind if you're unable to free your body to matters of the next world due to being so fully preoccupied with providing your livelihood and its maintenance, as our rabbis mentioned of many great men who would toil in matters of this world while being separate from it in heart and mind, such as Abba Chikiah, who would work hoeing the ground, Shammai in construction work, and Hillel would earn his livelihood by chopping trees and selling the wood. Let not your wholehearted abstinence prevent you from working in a secular occupation, since your intent in this is to serve God, as we had mentioned previously. But when you will be in a position to give up secular occupation, leave it and spend all your time in the service of God. But during these times you are unable to serve God due to the need to earn a livelihood, do not be satisfied with what we said, because he who watches your thoughts will help you to fulfill your desire in regard to his service. As our sages said, he who fulfills the Torah from poverty will eventually fulfill it from wealth, and he who neglects the Torah from wealth will eventually neglect it from poverty. It is proper for you to train yourself to curb your senses and movements, as I will explain to you. Regarding the tongue, begin at first by restraining your tongue and clamping down your lips, Refrain from idle words until you regard moving your heaviest limb to be easier than moving your tongue, for the tongue sins more quickly than all the other limbs, and its sins are more numerous than the sins committed by all of them, because it moves easily and swiftly. It easily completes its deeds and has the power to do good or evil without any intermediary. Therefore, my brother, it is incumbent upon you to train yourself to restrain and rule over your tongue. Do not unleash it to speak words except for what is indispensable for your Torah needs and your worldly needs. Diminish extra words of your tongue as much as you can. Perhaps you will be saved from its damage. As the wise man said, life and death are in the power of the tongue. They, the sages said, began exhorting on the tongue before the other senses and limbs, because it is more difficult to control than all of them. As David said, who is the man who desires life? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. In our holy books, the exhortations to minimize speech are so numerous and well known that it is not unfamiliar to anybody. If you wish to attain a clear understanding of what I mentioned of the many sins of the tongue, take yourself to remember what comes out of your tongue during the course of one day in your associations with other people and consorting with them. If you can write it all, do so. Afterwards at night, when you are free from your matters, go over it and reflect on it. See which of them were necessary and which of them were superfluous and without benefit, and which of them were harmful to you, such as falsehood, tale-bearing, swearing, lashon hara, negative speech about others. Then you will recognize your faults and you will see your iniquity. Remember them always, just like you remember the faults and iniquities of your enemies. Do not be diligent in this for a short time, so that your tongue will be rectified and your words will be few. In exchange for much talking, substitute prolonged thinking, continuous reflection, and spiritual accounting, because reflection is a candle which enters your heart, and the spiritual accounting is like the sun which illuminates the darkness of your interior being to reveal to you what is hidden inside, whether of good or of evil. The tongue is the gate of this inner being. If the tongue is unbridled and does not keep careful guard over what is in the inner being, then the gate of the treasury will be opened, and things will go out which you do not wish them to go out, and things will become visible which you do not wish to be visible. But if you guard the gate, you guard the treasury and what is in it. As the wise man said, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. He also says, do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God, and permit not your mouth to cause your flesh to sin. Guarding the eyes. Afterwards, endeavor to shut your eyes and shut your sense of sight from seeing that which you do not need, of that which will distract your mind from thinking of what will be of use to you. Separate yourself as much as you can from superfluous sights, just as you separate from looking at things which are forbidden to look at. The Creator has already exhorted on this, saying, you shall not wander after your hearts and after your eyes. And our sages said, the hearts and the eyes are two of the agents of sin. The eyes see, and then the heart desires. Rather, use your eyes to gaze at the works of the Creator, to examine them, to contemplate them, and to understand the omnipotence of the Creator and his wisdom and benevolence from them. As David said, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained, and the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Regarding the ears. Afterwards, endeavor to block your ears from listening to that which you have no need for. Separate as much as you can from listening to anything superfluous. Do not lend ear to listen to what will not be beneficial to hear, such as superfluous words, lies, tale-bearing, slander. Separate from hearing what will lead you to rebel against God or neglect his commandments, such as the various types of songs and melodies, comedy and merrymaking, which distract you from fulfilling the commandments and performing good deeds. Rather, lend your ears to the words of the sages who know God and his Torah. As the wise men said, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise, and the ear that hearkens to the reproof of life abides among the wise. Guarding the tongue from superfluous food. Afterwards, endeavor to bridle the sense of taste, and you take of the food and drink only as much as you need for your substance, and abstain from what is beyond this. The strategy to adopt in this manner is to reduce the various types of accompaniments and limit them to only one course if you can, to minimize this accompanying as much as you can, and to also have the intent to do this is to facilitate the transfer of bread to your stomach, not for enjoyment. Habituate yourself to sometimes eat your bread without accompaniment in order to lead your nature in this so that it will be easy for you to do this when the accompaniment is not available. If you can relinquish accompaniments which require effort and labor to prepare, and if you rely instead on what needs no labor to prepare, such as olives, cheese, dates, grapes, and the like, do so. If you're used to eating 2 meals a day, let that meal be a day by day be lighter than your meal at night, so that the movements of your body will be lighter during the day, and your religious and secular applications will be easier on you. Afterwards, practice fasting if your body is strong enough, even if this is only 1 day per week. Whatever you can do to train yourself to be indifferent to matters of eating and drinking, do so. Regard what you eat as a medicine rather than food. Your drinking should only be water unless your intent is drinking wine to benefit your body or to remove distress from your heart, as written, give strong drink to he who is ready to perish, and wine to the bitter soul. Be careful not to drink wine too frequently or too much, or to join drinking parties, because of the great sickness to religious and secular matters. And to the wise men already spoke sufficiently on this in saying, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging. And regarding eating and drinking, he said, be not among the wine bibbers, among gluttonous eaters of flesh, for a drunkard and glutton shall come to poverty. Guarding the hands. Afterwards, endeavor to restrain your hands from touching worldly possessions that are not yours. Separate from the various types of theft, fraud, robbery, and from doing any evil to any human being. Restrain the movement of your hands and think of its consequences. Guard your ethics and modesty by being elevated from doing evil with them, as written, keeping his hands from doing any evil. It also says that shakes his hands from holding bribes. Rather use your hands for fulfilling the commandments of God. Open them to give to the poor and needy, as written, you should surely open your hand unto your brother, to your poor, and to your needy in your land. And as it said, she stretches out her hand to the poor, she reaches forth her hand to the needy. And likewise, you need to use them for what will provide your livelihood, so that you will be saved from borrowing and stealing, and from the needing the kindness of people who support you, and to benefit you thereby, giving away to them your merits and giving your piety to he who is pious towards you. Likewise, so that you won't be a burden on the people, as the sages said, God will have great mercy on his servants who separate from this world, but only if his separation has not become a burden on his friends, because he engaged in a trade, thereby freeing them from troubling themselves for him, as written, for you shall eat the labor of your hands, happy shall be you, and it shall be well with you. It has already been said, the beginning of abstinence is the securing of a livelihood, and it was further stated, the beginning of abstinence is to think properly of arranging and obtaining of one's need, which means to work to secure one's needs. Guarding the feet. Afterwards, habituate your feet in this way and refrain from going with the wicked who seek the superfluous things, as written, blesses the man that walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the ways of the sinner, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Rather hasten to do all good deeds, and to the gatherings of the wise, as written, he who goes with the wise will become wise, but he who befriends the fools will be broken. And it says, in order that you will go in the way of the good. Scripture has already gathered together everything we introduced on curbing the senses, and saying, who among us shall dwell with the consuming fire? He that walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he that despises the gain of oppression, that keeps his hands from the holding of bribes, that stops his ears from hearing of blood, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. And afterwards the wise man gathered them and added to them in his heart, saying, there are 6 things that the Lord hates, and the 7th is an abomination of his soul: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that thinks wicked thoughts, feet that hasten to run to evil, a false witness who incites quarrels among brothers. And likewise they are found in Psalm 15, O God, who will dwell in your tent? All or nothing. It is proper for you to know, my brother, that it will not be possible for you to fulfill any of these matters unless you do all of them, and you don't admit even one of them, for they are like strings of pearls. If you release one of them, all the others will be scattered, and their unity will be destroyed. Therefore, strive to be careful in all of these rules, and then each one of them will help the others. As the sages said, a mitzvah brings another mitzvah, and a sin brings another sin. And the wise men said regarding the close connection of all good deeds, fortune's the man that listens to me, watching daily at my gates, guarding at the post of my doors. At first he says, listen, and after watching and after guarding. Inward abstinence. The abstinence which applies to the third type, namely what applies exclusively to ourselves, our thoughts, inner lives, our inclinations, good and evil. The beginning of this type of abstinence is separate in the heart and mind from material possessions, except for your food and living needs. not to engage them for securing any physical pleasures or to attain through them leisures or position of power, or to feel proud over owning possessions of this fleeting world. Let your abstinence in them be for God may be exalted, not to acquire a name, not to feel proud for abstaining from these pleasures, and not to save your money due to their abstinence. Do not go out to the bounds of the Torah, such as fasting on the Sabbath holidays or the new moon, or to refrain from the Creator obligated you in the commandment of having children. Rather, your matters of abstinence should be inwardly and outwardly in line with the Torah and the religion. Afterwards, diminish your desires for this world. And if you are journeying from it an evening in this day, afterwards make a spiritual accounting with yourself, as we mentioned earlier in the Gate of Spiritual Counting. You should abandon all thoughts of what belongs to other people while trusting in God and be contented with his decrees and judgments. Realize that you are under obligation to fulfill all the duties of the heart, which we have previously clarified, and that they are the pillar of abstinence in this world. Investigate them closely and bind them to your heart. You will attain through them to all good. Chapter 6, what Scripture says of abstinence. The explanation of what is written in the holy books and the words of our sages regarding abstinence from the world. Among them, what Jacob says, and Yaakov vowed, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and a garment to wear. Among them, the fasting of Moses of 40 days and nights, 3 times. Likewise, Eliyahu 40 days is written, and he rose and ate and drank, and he went on with only this meal for 40 days and for 40 nights up to the mountain of God. Among them, what was said of the Nazir, which God calls holy, is written, all the days of his abstinence he is holy to God, because he abstains from fruits of the vine and allowed his hair to grow long, and the more so for one abstains from all physical pleasures, that he is greater reward and recompense. Among them, what it was said of Aaron, do not drink wine or beer, and then to separate between holy and mundane, and to teach the Jewish people. Through this, God exhorted everyone who is engaged in religious service to not occupy himself with anything that would distract him from completely doing the service to God. As our sages said, one who drank a revius of wine is forbidden to teach. If he drank a chamishius, he should not pray. Among them, the matter of the sons of Yonadav ben Rachav, whose father commanded them to never drink wine, not sow, not plant a vineyard, nor build a house, that they dwell in tents outside settled places. This custom of those who separate themselves from the world, the Creator praised them for this, as written, then Yonadav the son of Rechab shall not lack a man to stand before me forever. Among them, the story of Elisha, when the Yahoo passed by him, as written, and he went from there, and he found Elisha the son of Shaphat, as he was plowing 12 yoke were before him, and he was with the 12th, and they all passed over unto him, and cast his mantle upon him. And Elisha dropped everything and followed Eliyahu as written, and he left the ox and ran after Eliyahu, and said, let me please kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you. Likewise, this was the practice of the disciples of the prophets in that generation, and the previous ones, that they renounced occupying themselves with affairs of this world, and neglected their physical well-being by going out in the desert in order to devote their souls and mind to God. Among them, what the Torah has commanded us to fast during the season of repentance and seek forgiveness, in order to curb our lust from all the pleasures which are the greatest cause of sin, as written, according to the pasture, so were they filled. They were filled, and their heart was exalted. Therefore they forgotten me, and as it said regarding the opposite, in their trouble they will seek me. Among them, what is written, neither shall they wear a robe of court's hair to deceive. And this teaches that it was the attire of the early pious ones and some of the other non-pious men that the generation would wear to appear pious. And what David said, before I was afflicted, I did err. And also, it was good for me that I've been afflicted, in order that I might learn your statutes. And also, the Torah of your mouth is better unto me than thousands of gold and silver. Among them is practice of Job, who described of himself how he scorned this world and his material wealth, curbed his senses, bound his hand and tongue from all that may lead to rebelling against God, chose the truth, saved the oppressed, provided the poor and the lost, like the practices of those who separated themselves from this world. Among them, what Daniel did in praying to God on the lengthiness of the exile and mourning on it. And he said, I ate no decent bread, neither came meat nor wine in my mouth. And the angel said to him, from the first day that you did not set your heart, that you set your heart to understand, and to chasten yourself before God. Your words were heard, and the rest of the matter, this is the best of all the practices of separation. Among them that which the people of Nineveh did when they heard what the Creator decreed on them, as written. So the people of Nineveh believed in God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. And similarly, what our fathers did in the days of Haman, as written in every province where the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And remain like this in our books. When you investigate it, you will find it scattered frequently in the words of our ancestors. Among them, when Shlomo said, "Be not among the wine-bibbers, among the gluttonous eaters of flesh, and a little sheep, a little slumber, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to lie." And what the mother of Lemuel said, "Do not give your strength to the woman, nor your ways to the pleasure of kings. It is not for kings the mule, it is not for kings to drink wine, neither for the strong drink for rulers, lest he drink and forget what was decreed." Among them it was written, "For the man that is good in his sight, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner he has given an occupation to gather and to accumulate." And it says, "The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of the fools is in the house of merrymaking. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to heart." And it says, "The sleep of the laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not allow him to sleep. And from childhood and youth are vanity, and the end of the matter, all having been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is all of man." Regarding what our sages in the Mishnah and Talmud, these are too numerous for this book, and most of it can be found in Tractate Avos. As our sages said, this is the way of Torah: eat bread and with salt, drink water in measure, sleep on the ground, and so on. And that which is near their words, the Torah is acquired in 48 ways: minimal business, minimal pleasures, minimal sleep, minimal speech, minimal laughter. And in the chapter of the pious and the Tractate fasting, many things teaches on the great separation from this world. He who investigates this matter will find in scripture, reason, and in the oral tradition. Put it to your heart, reflect on it. In your inner being, you will reach it with God's help, as written, "If you seek it as silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you shall understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." Chapter 7. The difference between the early ones and us. The difference between us and our predecessors regarding separation is as follows. For the early ones, such as Clonok, Noach, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Eov, and the company, their intellect was pure and their inclination for evil was weak, so their souls were drawn after their intellect. The few mitzvahs they had, combined with their heartfelt faith in God, were sufficient for them to complete their service of God, as written by Abraham, "You found his heart faithful before you." They did not need the abstinence which goes out of the middle way, which the Torah prescribes. But when their descendants descended to Egypt, and they dwelled there 70 years in peace during Joseph's time, their lust became strong, their desires grew, and their evil inclination overpowered their reason. They then needed an abstinence which would be counter to their lust, and which would allow them to resist their evil inclination. The Creator added on them additional commandments which reason does not obligate. This would serve as a substitute for the abstinence which was proper for them according to their ability, and even less than that. When they conquered the land of Israel and settled it and enjoyed its good, they started to seek superfluities in food and drink, indulgence with women, and erecting buildings. The more the land was developed, the more their intellect deteriorated, as written, "Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built goodly houses and dwelled therein, then your hearts will be lifted up and you will forget God." And the more lust increased and strengthened, the more the intellect weakened and delayed grasping the correct way. Therefore, they were in need of severe abstinence, through which they would be able to resist their lust, as in the way of the Nazar and the disciples of the prophets, which we mentioned previously in this book. In the later generations, the intellect has become weaker still, while the lust have strengthened more. When other people are occupied in secular matters, they are distracted from being concerned with matters of the next world. Therefore, they need separation from this world to free themselves from it whenever they are doing anything of the next world. The early ones, with their strong intellect and pure souls, were capable of working for this world and also for the final one. Neither one would be detrimental to the others, as written, "Did not your father eat and drink and do justice and righteousness?" And then it was all well with them. And it says, It is good that you should take hold of this, and also from this you shall not withdraw your hand. I saw my brother, a powerful parable of the matter of separation from one of the pious who commanded his son in it as his last testament. It pleased my eye, and I placed it as the final words on this gate, as I found it, instead of ending with my own rebuke and teaching. Understand it and examine it, and you will reach the good and the just with God's help. Here it is. Now, my son, may God place you among those that will hear and that listen and think, and that think and know and do, and not among the people who drowned in error, who are drunk with the wine of foolishness, which the evil inclination has enslaved them and ruled this over them, and which the lust have overpowered them and swayed them towards the pleasures and enticed them to the desires and drawn them to coveting. And they in their darkness are smitten and swiftly more dazzled in their error. They hear but do not lend ear. They say but do not do. They sought the leisures but fell into the frustrations, endeavors to reach the pleasing, but reached and said, the heart is suffering, their soul is tired, and their body is weary. Their minds are empty, and their understanding is shattered. They hoard gold to be lost, and fleeting silver, which becomes an inheritance to their enemies or to their traitorous wives. They erect mansions and lie down in graves. They build but don't dwell. They amass and don't spend. Each man among them buries his fathers and his sons, yet still does not do religious deeds which endure forever. He forgets his ends, but remembers his desires. What will you say of a middle piece which lost both end pieces, and of a child whose parents abandoned him? Look, my son, at whose heart the Creator has broadened, and who God has helped him rule over his thoughts, opened his eyes for what is good for him, showed him the straight path, and drew him close to it. People are assured of him, and he is assured of them. He is at peace with them and saved from them. People serve their evil inclination, but he serves the God of heaven and earth, who grants life, who brings death, the Creator, who is gracious, and there is no God besides him. Look at the difference between them and who serve their evil inclination and the men with pure intentions who serve God. Their eyes are at rest, unlike the desirous, whose eyes are always scanning to spot desirous things they enjoy and to afterwards strive to obtain them. And their hearts are secure. They are not worried or pained by anything. And in their solitude, they delight in remembering God, thank him for his goodness in all their situations. They quickly grasp all forms of deep wisdom. They ripped off the veil from their eyes, which prevents seeing the interior ways. They reached the true tranquility through their toil to conquer their lust. Their tranquility led them to delight. Their desires do not distract them, nor does their long life make them procrastinate. They are zealous to prepare for the day of death, and from what is after it. They prepare, call to God, seek him, hope him, and serve him. They speak truth, converse righteousness without fear of the devil and without being ruled by the devil. They are more precious to God than any man, and more guarded than any nation. Their splendor and grandeur is greater than all of them, honored in the house of God and great in the eyes of men. Nothing distracts them away from remembering God, and nothing prevents them from thanking him. Their tongue is habituated in praise and thanksgiving, and their hearts are full of purity and unity. This world disguised itself, but they recognized it, and they trend it and told of it. The deception was not hidden from their eyes, neither was its fraud concealed. This world adorned itself to them with beautiful garments, but they considered it naked and empty. It deprived them of livelihood, but it was forced. It tried to befriend them with wealth, but they scolded it. It tried to sway them, but they distanced from it. They gazed at its evil deeds and understood its disgraceful acts, and it had no dominion over them, and nothing which with to approach them. They are the choicest of God, the pure ones, and the treasure to the pious, possessors of discerning eyes, noble desires, favored deeds, who dug after God and became rich, did business with him and profited. God was gratified with them, purified their hearts, and became pure. They equipped themselves with fear of God in the paths of evil and were saved. They rode the wagon of piety and arrived, met with eternal joy, and the delight which never erodes, were spared from the assembly of judgment. They were saved from the punishments of hell. And you, my son, choose the good for your soul before the regret which will not avail and the worry which will never end. May God teach us the just path and incline us on the road of salvation, his mercy and greatest kindness. Amen. And so ends chapter 9. the 9th gate of abstinence of duties of the heart. Hope to finish up tomorrow before the holiday Shavuos. Shalom. Bless everyone.